So for the first drawing, we're focusing on the Rubik's Cube. And with the Rubik's Cube, if you haven't used one of these before, essentially the Rubik's Cube is a giant cube that would fit in your hands, and it's made up of a bunch of smaller cubes. And the goal is to rotate these smaller cubes around until you have a solid color on each of the 6 sides of the cube. So one thing that we're practicing aside from form drawing is how do we take something in color and convert it into black and white? And so that's going to be another objective or goal with this drawing. So what we're seeing in this image is a guide. So we have black as, we're putting it like as a 6, so it's the darkest. Blue is going to be the next darkest, then green, red, orange, yellow, and white is going to be the lightest value. And so what this means is we're talking about all of the different values and the strengths of the pencil marks that you're making. Now the key to creating this form, the cube, is we really want to make sure all of our lines are parallel. So the top 4 lines that are marked on the screen, all of those lines are very, very parallel or very, very close to it, where there's only a slight degree of difference. And we're seeing that on the sides also. So as you're drawing, if you see any misangled lines that aren't parallel with one another, that's probably why your drawing looks incorrect. So this is also going to happen when these lines go the other way. So as you're drawing, you're going to want to base your image off this Rubik's Cube, and notice that it is a little bit different than the cube you practice for the Forms with Values project. In the Forms with Values project, we saw a real basic squared side in that. We don't have that here. We have kind of these skewed angles, and we're going to learn how to draw with those. So several examples of this assignment from the past. We see a Rubik's Cube that has been drawn with nothing but cross-hatching. So they have used cross-hatching for the values in this work. Now you can tell where the white is because there isn't any cross-hatching. It's been left completely blank. The yellow is easy to spot because there are few cross-hatching marks, and so it doesn't look very dark. And you can tell where the blue is. The blue is the darkest squared area that has value in it. And then of course the black is going to be the darkest. And so this is what we're talking about when we're looking at the scale of 0 to 6 in terms of the darkness of the values you're going to apply. So in these 2 versions, these are both using cross-hatching. So we're seeing the cross-hatching technique. You're also seeing like that, we can definitely tell how there are lots of different colors in these cubes, not just 2 or 3. So there's a variety of value darknesses which have been translated from the color image. This cube is using a variety of value techniques. So we see cross-hatching, we see tonal shading, we see some hatching. So you don't have to necessarily stick with one specific value technique as you're drawing this. If you want to use multiple, you certainly can, or if you just want to use one on your Rubik's Cube drawing, you can certainly do that as well. So this Rubik's Cube drawing from last year uses hatching. So it's very easy to see again where the white is, where the yellow is. The yellow has very few lines. The orange has a few more lines than that. Then of course the blue has the most lines filled in. So remember, with value, the closer you put your lines together, the darker it's going to look. The more you space your lines out, the lighter it's going to look. So let's look at how we're going to draw this Rubik's Cube. Okay, so what we're going to look at, we're going to look at how to draw the Rubik's Cube. So really the best way to start is you want to have a line that is vertical in the middle of your paper, and don't put it too high because then you'll run out of room at the top. So we're going to create this vertical line, and as we're drawing, we always want to keep our sketch lines going. Don't just try and draw it with one single line because you're kind of like stuck with that line if you draw it too hard. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create kind of like wings. And with these wing lines, we want to make sure that these are parallel. So right now I've sketched this line to begin. And an easy way to kind of make sure you're keeping your lines parallel is that you've got a bunch of pencils, use your pencils, and just try and mimic the angle in which that pencil is going. So here we have these two lines, and if you need to check it again, just put your pencils like this, and this space is about the same, so that's a pretty good start. Then what we will do is connect these two. Now if you're just wanting to connect this line and this line, what's going to happen is it's going to kind of bow out like this. We need this line to be like this, so it has to be parallel with that center line that you just drew. So again, an easy way to do this is just keep your other pencil there, just try and guide your hand downward to match that. And then after you draw this line, if you just put your pencil there on the line, looks parallel for the most part. And we're going to do the same on this other side. So essentially when we're done, it'll almost look like an open book. Then I'm going to draw the line going this way. So again, I want to make sure that this line is going to be parallel with this. And don't feel like you have to keep your sketchbook exactly like this. You know, it's okay to like turn it around and twist it around if that helps you draw a line or object correctly. So for me, it's a little bit easier if I just turn my sketchbook rather than work with it how I began. So let's check these two. Looks pretty good so far. And then we'll have another straight line coming down. So again, we want to make sure that the line that I'm drawing is going to be parallel. And you know, if I have to, I can turn my sketchbook around. And that really does help me kind of make sure that the lines are parallel with one another. So as you can see, this line was a little short, not a big deal. Just connect it to this. So we now have this open book look. So it's like the cover of a book, the front and the back. And what we also want to look out for is, remember, we're doing a cube. If you make these two lines too long this way, or these two lines too long this way, you're not going to get a cube, you're going to get a cuboid. So it's going to be more of a rectangular box rather than a box with squared sides. So it's just something you want to look out for. After we have these lines, we want to do the top. So this part can be a little tricky. So this is where you're definitely wanting to keep your lines parallel. So what you may have the tendency to do is to draw up too high, and that will distort the top part of your cube. So another thing you can do is I can take this pencil and just, you know, make sure it's at a parallel angle with this. So like this would be too high, this would be too low. Just really try and get the angles about the same. And if you want, you can just kind of like sketch along that pencil. So there we are. And I drew it a little bit long, but that's alright, because it can always be erased or just drawn over. And then we want to do the same on this side. So here's the line that I need to keep parallel. So if I just set this here, definitely less space here than we have between these two pencils. So I'm just going to angle it just a little bit. That looks better. And then we're going to sketch this new back line. So as you can see, I was just a little bit off. So we're just going to correct that. So this is kind of the basic premise for our Rubik's Cube. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is with the Rubik's Cube there are 3 rows and then 3 columns that come down, and then same on this side. So what I'm going to want to do is this first line that I started with, I'm going to divide it by 3 or into thirds. So I'm just going to eyeball it to start off with. And if we look, from here to here is a little bit taller than from here to here. So we'll just want to maybe adjust it just a little bit because we want equal spacing. Maybe a little bit lower, so right there. Now, after I have these marks, I'm going to draw over this way. But remember, I need to keep it parallel with this. Okay, so far so good. And then this line will be parallel with this line and parallel with this new line that I just drew. So again, if you need to, you can put your pencil down and kind of mark where that line will be. Or you can put it here and mark how the line should be. It's whatever really works best for you. And again, just keep sketching. Don't get too hung up on one single line. Using these sketch marks are extremely important. They're really going to help you with all of the drawings that you work on in class and for this project in particular. So we have these markings, so now we just need these to go this way. So now we have what kind of looks like a layered piece of cake or something. Now we have to do the top pieces. So what I can do is this line that runs along here, I'm just going to divide this into 3 equal parts as well. So there's 1 and 2. The spacing of these lines looks pretty good. So I just want to, again, make sure that these lines coming down are parallel with this center line. And as you're drawing, really kind of get a feel for how your hand is drawing. You may have a tendency to, when you sketch, to like pull your lines this way. You can see that this line kind of angled in a little bit. So it's all about kind of self-correcting as you're working. Alright, so now we just need to do the same over here. So you can see I kind of started off a little off where I should have been, so I'm just correcting these as I go. And really, this is probably too narrow, so we're going to change that up. Because if you don't correct like with this particular drawing, if you don't correct a mistake right off the bat, it's really going to cause you some problems further down the line when you go. Alright, that looks better. So now we're going to correct this one. Alright, there we are. Now for the top part, this is a little bit easier, but it's also difficult at the same time. So we already have these lines where we need to draw over. But what happens a lot of times is you'll start drawing and then this will get up too high. And then this one gets too high and you have like these like really crazy angles. So just remember, you got to keep your stuff parallel. So if I'm starting with this one, I need to keep it parallel with my pencil. And it may not feel very natural to do this, but you got to kind of make it go in the right direction because you're kind of drawing over this way at an angle, but you're seeing all these other lines. So it can throw you off just a bit. And then we're going to do this one. So as you can see, I'm kind of starting on this side and then going back to the other side and then basically trying to meet in the middle for the most part. And now we're going to do the other side. So this is kind of a natural motion to do this. to do this way and then this way. Not so natural just because I'm right-handed. So if I turn the sketchbook just a little bit, it makes it a little easier for me. Alright, so now we have that basic structure of the Rubik's Cube. Now, what I'm going to do before I jump in and start applying all my values, I'm going to round these corners just a little bit. So let's zoom in just a touch. There we are. And remember, these tiny cubes within the Rubik's Cube have to be able to twist. So where I have these like really sharp angles, I want to get rid of those. So I'm just going to kind of trace as I go, and then curve. Then on this next one, I'll do the same thing. Kind of trace what I already have, and then curve. So you want to keep what you have. You know, if it's not looking correct, change it. But once you have it how it should look, go through and just round off these corners. So this may take a minute, just don't get impatient. And like one thing that people do that is incorrect, they'll like try and like kind of like create these like weird stars in here. You know, don't do that. That's going to create like too much of a black negative space. You know, simply by going through and rounding these corners, for example, you're going to want to do this throughout. This will really help add that sense of realism to your drawing. And then after you get all the corners rounded, then you can go in with, you know, like your 6B pencil, since it's really dark, and you can add your darker values to like these spaces. You can thicken up some of these lines just a little bit. And then after you kind of make those darker spaces in between your small cubes in your Rubik's Cube, then you can go in and excuse me, really make your values. So for example, if I'm wanting to use hatching, remember, you know, follow your angles. So hatching, I can go this way. So let's say this is maybe the red value, you know, where it's dark but not super dark. If I'm doing cross hatching, you know, I want to go straight up and down. So I want to keep all my lines parallel. And even if you're doing tonal shading, for example, you want to make sure that your tonal shading marks are going with the lines of your form, as this will help with the accuracy of it. So after you have this basic structure of your Rubik's Cube, you know, that's where you would go through again and just kind of round all of these little areas. And then you would go in and darken your lines. And then you'll apply your values last. And one last tip, as you're drawing, you know, check your hand, because your hand can have a tendency to smudge a lot of this pencil. So if you get like a scrap piece of paper that's fairly slick, so let's say I'm starting to add my value on this cube. You know, if I get some scrap paper, put it right here, I can go in and draw on my new areas without worrying about smudging stuff that I've already drawn. So not only does it keep your hands clean, but all those small textures that you're putting into your drawing, you're not losing those at all because you're protecting them, because your hands are you know, the hands have texture to them, and they have oils which can smudge out the pencil. So just one little thing to look for. If you have any questions on this drawing, just send me a message through Schoology or email, and I will see what I can do to help.